The morning rain had turned Chicago's Millennium Park into a maze of puddles and scattered tourists. Maria Elena Vasquez adjusted the plastic tarp over her small cart for the 100th time, watching droplets form and fall onto the already damp pavement. At 43, she had learned that weather didn't care about bills and bills didn't care about weather. Fresh sandwiches. Ham and cheese turkey club, she called out, her voice competing with the rumble of early commuters rushing past. The yellow umbrella above her cart, faded and patched in 3 places, did little to keep her dry, but it had been her shield against Chicago's unpredictable weather for 7 years. Maria's hands moved with practiced efficiency, arranging the last 6 sandwiches in the small cooler. Each one represented nearly $2 in ingredients she'd scraped together from her weekly grocery budget. The math was always tight. Sell 4 to break even, 5 to eat that night, 6 to maybe save something for next week's supplies. A businessman in an expensive suit hurried past, his phone pressed to his ear. No, the Henderson account needs to be closed by noon, he was saying, not even glancing at her cart. Maria had learned not to take it personally. In this part of the city, surrounded by towering glass buildings and corporate headquarters, she was practically invisible. She pulled her worn cardigan tighter around her shoulders and checked her phone. 10:47 a.m. Usually by this time she'd have sold at least 2 sandwiches to the construction workers from the site across the street. But the rain had driven everyone indoors, and her stomach was already reminding her that she'd skipped breakfast again. That's when she heard it. A small broken sob cutting through the sound of traffic and rain. Maria turned toward the sound and saw him, a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sitting on the steps of the Art Institute. His school backpack was soaked through, and his thin jacket offered no protection against the October chill. But it wasn't the rain that had caught Maria's attention. It was the way his small shoulders shook with each quiet cry. She glanced around, looking for a parent, a teacher, anyone who might be responsible for this child. The steps were empty, except for a few tourists hurrying toward the museum entrance. The boy seemed completely alone. Maria felt something twist in her chest. Her own son, Diego, was about the same age when they'd first moved to Chicago 8 years ago. She remembered his first day at the new school, how he'd cried because the other kids made fun of his accent, how small and lost he'd looked. "Hey, sweetheart," she called out gently, leaving her cart and walking toward the boy. "Are you okay?" The child looked up, revealing tear-streaked cheeks and the kind of lost expression that broke hearts. He was mixed race, with curly hair that stuck to his forehead and clothes that, while clean, had seen better days. "I'm hungry," he whispered, so quietly Maria had to lean closer to hear him. "And I can't find my mom." "Where did you last see her?" Maria asked, crouching down to his level despite the cold concrete soaking through her jeans. "She said she had to go to work early, but she'd leave money for lunch at school." His voice cracked. "But I looked everywhere in my backpack, and it's not there. And now everyone's eating and He dissolved into fresh tears. Maria's heart clenched. She knew that desperation, had felt it herself during those first months in Chicago, when everything seemed impossible and every dollar had to stretch beyond reason. "What's your name, honey?" "Marcus," he sniffled. "Marcus Johnson. I go to Lincoln Elementary, but I came here because Mom sometimes works around here cleaning offices, and I thought maybe..." "Okay, Marcus, listen to me." Maria's voice was gentle but firm. "We're going to figure this out, but first you need to eat something." She stood up and looked back at her cart, then at the hungry child in front of her. The decision should have been difficult. Those sandwiches represented her day's income, possibly her own dinner, but looking at Marcus, she didn't hesitate. "Come on," she said, extending her hand. "I've got something for you." Marcus followed her back to the cart, his steps uncertain. Maria opened the cooler and pulled out her best sandwich: turkey, Swiss cheese, lettuce, tomato, and just a touch of mustard on fresh bread she'd bought that morning from the discount bakery. "Here you go," she said, wrapping it carefully in a napkin. "Turkey club. Made fresh this morning." Marcus stared at the sandwich as if it were made of gold. "But I don't have any money." "Did I ask for money?" Maria smiled, the kind of smile that had comforted Diego through countless scraped knees and bad dreams. "Sometimes the most important things in life are free." As Marcus took his first bite, his eyes closing in relief and gratitude, Maria felt a presence behind her. Someone had been standing there, watching. She could feel eyes on her back, that strange sensation of being observed. She turned around casually, expecting to see another potential customer, or maybe a security guard, wondering why a child was sitting alone on the museum steps. Instead, she found herself looking at a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, despite the rain. He was probably in his 50s, with the kind of bearing that spoke of boardrooms and important decisions. But what struck Maria most was his expression. He wasn't looking at her with the usual indifference of wealthy passers-by. He was looking at her with something that might have been surprise or perhaps recognition. Their eyes met for a moment that seemed to stretch longer than it should have. The man's gaze moved from Maria to Marcus, who was now eating the sandwich with the desperate hunger of a child who hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. Then back to Maria. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise certainly, but also something deeper. Something that made her suddenly conscious of her wet cardigan, her faded jeans, the way her hair was escaping from its ponytail. "Mom?" the man said, his voice carrying a slight southern accent that wealth and education hadn't quite erased. "That was very kind of you." Maria straightened, suddenly defensive. She'd learned to be wary of well-dressed strangers who paid too much attention to her business. "The boy was hungry," she said simply. The man nodded slowly, still watching her with that unreadable expression. He seemed to be processing something, calculating something in his mind. "That sandwich," he said after a moment. "That was probably your lunch, wasn't it?" The question caught Maria off guard. Most people wouldn't have noticed, wouldn't have cared enough to think about the economics of a street vendor's day. She lifted her chin slightly. "I'll be fine," she said. "I'm sure you will be," the man replied. But there was something in his tone that suggested he understood more than she'd expected. "For you always are, aren't you?" Before Maria could ask what he meant by that strange comment, Marcus tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Maria, I think I see my mom," he said excitedly, pointing toward a woman in a cleaning service uniform running toward them through the rain. As the reunion unfolded, tears, apologies, explanations about a misplaced envelope with lunch money, Maria became aware that the well-dressed man was still there, still watching, still wearing that expression of someone who had just witnessed something that confirmed a long-held belief. When Marcus and his mother finally walked away, the boy turning back to wave gratefully, Maria found herself alone with the stranger. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Maria," she replied, unsure why she was answering. "Maria," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "How long have you been working here, Maria?" The question felt loaded somehow, as if her answer mattered more than it should to a passing stranger. 7 years, she said, then found herself adding, "Every day, rain or shine." The man nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket. For a moment, Maria tensed, wondering if he was reaching for a phone to call security, to report her for some violation she wasn't aware of. Instead, he pulled out a business card and held it out to her. "I'd like to talk with you tomorrow," he said. "Would you be willing to meet me for coffee?" Maria stared at the card but didn't take it. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "But I know you, Maria. I've been watching you work for a very long time. Tell us, what city or country are you watching this story from? It's always incredible to know how far these narratives reach." Maria stared at the business card long after the man had disappeared into the crowd. The rain had stopped, but she could still feel droplets falling from the museum's overhang above her cart. The card was expensive, thick, cream-colored paper with embossed lettering that caught the grey afternoon light. "Jonathan Whitmore," it read in elegant serif font. "Chief Executive Officer, Whitmore Enterprises." Below that, an address that made Maria's stomach drop. Whitmore Tower, 875 North Michigan Avenue. She knew that building. Everyone in Chicago knew that building. 47 floors of glass and steel that housed one of the largest real estate development companies in the Midwest. She passed it every morning on her way to set up her cart, had watched construction crews work on Whitmore projects throughout the city. "Mommy, you look like you've seen a ghost." Maria looked up to find her neighbor, Rosa Delgado, approaching with her own cart, churros and coffee that always smelled like heaven and home. "Someone wants to meet me for coffee tomorrow," Maria said, still staring at the card. Rosa raised an eyebrow. "Someone handsome? Someone rich? Even better." Rosa grinned, but her expression grew serious when she saw Maria's face. "What's wrong? You look scared." Maria handed her the card. Rosa's eyes widened as she read it. "Ay, Dios mío. The Jonathan Whitmore, the one who owns half of downtown. He said he's been watching me work for a long time," Maria whispered. "What could that mean? Am I in trouble? Is my permit not right? Maybe I'm not supposed to be here and—" "Stop!" Rosa gripped her arm. "You've done nothing wrong. Your permit is good. You pay your fees. You follow all the rules. Maybe he wants to offer you something. Like what? I don't know, but men like that don't waste time on people unless there's a reason." That night, Maria sat at her small kitchen table in the one-bedroom apartment she shared with Diego, staring at the business card propped against the salt shaker. Her son was doing homework on the couch, the television providing background noise to fill the silence. "Mom, you're being weird," Diego said without looking up from his math workbook. At 15, he had developed an uncomfortable ability to read her moods. "I'm not being weird. You've been staring at that card for like an hour, and you haven't eaten anything." Maria looked at the sandwich she'd made herself, peanut butter and jelly, Diego's childhood favorite that had become their dinner staple when money was tight. Her stomach was empty, but anxiety had stolen her appetite. "Someone wants to meet me tomorrow," she said finally. "About what?" "I don't know." Diego closed his workbook and turned to face her. Sometimes Maria was struck by how much older than his years her son looked. Growing up with a single mother who worked 7 days a week had forced him to mature quickly. Is it about the cart? Maybe. Are we in trouble? The question broke Maria's heart. At 15, Diego shouldn't have to worry about their financial security, shouldn't have to ask if they were in trouble every time something unexpected happened. "No, mijo, we're not in trouble." "Then go meet with him. What's the worst that could happen?" The next morning, Maria stood outside Starbucks on East Randolph Street, 15 minutes early and wearing her best dress, a navy blue shirt dress she'd bought 2 years ago for a parent-teacher conference. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold October air, but from nerves that had kept her awake most of the night. She had almost convinced herself to leave 3 times when she saw him approaching. Jonathan Whitmore looked even more imposing in daylight, his presence commanding attention even in a city full of important people. But as he got closer, Maria noticed something she'd missed the day before, kindness in his eyes, and something that might have been nervousness. "Maria," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but brief, and he gestured toward the coffee shop. "Shall we?" Inside, he insisted on buying her coffee and pastry, despite her protests. As they sat at a corner table, Maria noticed how other customers glanced their way, not at her, but at him. Whispered conversations, pointing, the kind of recognition that came with being featured on magazine covers. "You're wondering why I asked you here," he said, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "The thought had crossed my mind." Jonathan smiled, and for the first time since yesterday, Maria felt some of her tension ease. His smile was genuine, not the practiced expression of someone used to getting what he wanted. "I want to tell you a story," he said, "about a little boy whose mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table." Maria frowned. "I'm not sure I understand." "This boy lived in a small town in Alabama. His mother cleaned offices at night, worked at a diner during the day, and took in sewing on weekends. They lived in a tiny apartment above a hardware store, and sometimes, more often than he liked to admit, there wasn't enough food." Something in his tone made Maria lean forward. "Mr. Whitmore, Jonathan, please, and let me finish." He paused, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "One day when this boy was about 8 years old, he was walking home from school. He was hungry, had been hungry for 2 days because his mother's paycheck was late and she'd given him the last of their food. He sat down on some steps and started crying." Maria's breath caught. "A woman saw him," Jonathan continued, his voice softer now. "A woman who was selling sandwiches from a small cart. She didn't know him, didn't know his story, but she saw a hungry child and she gave him her only remaining sandwich, turkey and cheese, if I remember correctly." "That's impossible," Maria whispered. "Is it?" Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, old, creased but clear enough, a much younger version of himself sitting on concrete steps, holding a sandwich. "My mother took this picture when she finally found me that day. She wanted to remember the kindness of strangers." Maria stared at the photograph, then at Jonathan, her mind racing. "But that was how long ago?" 35 years, he said quietly. "I was 8 years old, hungry and scared, and a street vendor saved my day, maybe my life. I don't understand." "You said you've been watching me work for a long time." Jonathan nodded. "I moved to Chicago 15 years ago, built my first building here, started my company. 3 years later, I was walking past the Art Institute when I saw a woman with a yellow umbrella selling sandwiches. Something about her seemed familiar." "That's when you recognized me?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "It took me years to be sure, and honestly, I might never have been certain if not for yesterday." "What happened yesterday?" "I watched you give your sandwich to a hungry child without hesitation, without thinking about what it would cost you. I watched you show the same kindness that changed my life 35 years ago." His voice grew thick with emotion. "And I knew it was you." Maria felt tears building behind her eyes. I don't even remember that day in Alabama. I've given away so many sandwiches over the years. That's exactly my point, Jonathan said, leaning forward. For you, it was just another day, another hungry child. You probably forgot about it an hour later, but for me it was everything. It was proof that good people existed in the world, that kindness wasn't dead. I still don't understand why you're telling me this. Jonathan reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Because that 8-year-old boy you fed went on to build a fortune, and he never forgot the woman who showed him that strangers could care about each other. Maria stared at him, pieces of a puzzle she didn't know existed finally clicking into place. I want to help you, he said simply, the way you helped me. I don't need charity. This isn't charity, Maria. This is gratitude and opportunity. Before she could respond, Jonathan pulled out another card, this one with an address and a time. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I'd like to show you something that might change your life. If this story is touching you in some way, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Every place has its own struggles, and sometimes it's incredible to see how we all connect through such human stories. Shayasi Stipalaka Maria stood in front of the glass doors of Whitmore Tower, clutching the address card so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The building stretched impossibly high above her, its reflective surface catching the morning sun and throwing it back at the bustling street below. She had walked past this building hundreds of times, but she had never imagined she would actually walk through its doors. Can I help you? The security guard's voice was polite, but wary as he looked at Maria's simple black pants and white blouse, her interview outfit, though she wasn't sure what she was interviewing for. I'm here to see Mr. Whitmore, Maria Vasquez. The guard checked his computer, his eyebrows rising slightly. 47th floor, the elevator bank on your right. As the elevator climbed, Maria watched the floor numbers light up and tried to calm her racing heart. 30, 35, 40. Each floor represented a level of success she'd never dreamed of reaching. What could Jonathan possibly want to show her here? The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that looked like something from a magazine. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that probably cost more than Maria made in a year. A young woman in a perfectly tailored suit smiled at her from behind a curved desk. Mrs. Vasquez, Mr. Whitmore is waiting for you in his office. The office was even more impressive than the reception area. One entire wall was windows offering a panoramic view of Chicago, from Lake Michigan to the sprawling neighborhoods where people like Maria lived and worked. But what caught her attention wasn't the view or the expensive furniture. It was the wall of photographs, pictures of construction sites, building openings, ribbon cuttings. And in many of them, she recognized faces from her neighborhood. Rosa from the churro cart, Miguel who sold flowers on the corner, other vendors and small business owners she'd known for years. You're wondering what all these pictures have in common, Jonathan said, entering the office behind her. They're all from my neighborhood, Maria said slowly. These are all businesses around Millennium Park. Not just around the park, throughout the South Loop, Little Village, Pilsen, all the areas where hard-working people like you are trying to build something. Jonathan moved to stand beside her, pointing to a photo of a small restaurant with a ribbon stretched across its front door. This is Carmen's Cocina. Carmen used to sell tamales from a cart outside the train station. Maria knew Carmen. They'd worked the same area for 3 years before Carmen disappeared one day. Maria had assumed she'd given up, maybe moved back to Mexico. And this, Jonathan pointed to another photo, is Roberto's auto shop. Roberto used to fix cars in his alley behind his apartment building. I don't understand, Maria said, though a strange feeling was building in her chest. For the past 5 years I've been running a program, Jonathan explained, walking to his desk and picking up a thick folder. I identify small business owners and vendors who show exceptional character, work ethic and community spirit. Then I help them transition from street-level businesses to permanent storefronts. Maria stared at him. You've been doing this for 5 years? Started small. Carmen was my first success story. I provided the loan for her restaurant, helped her navigate permits and licenses, connected her with suppliers. She now employs 8 people, and her restaurant is booked solid every weekend. And Roberto? Owns 3 auto shops now. He's the official mechanic for half the small businesses in Pilsen. Jonathan's smile was proud, like a teacher talking about star pupils. 23 vendors so far. 23 people who went from selling on the street to owning their own businesses. Maria felt dizzy. She sat down in one of the leather chairs facing Jonathan's desk. Why are you telling me this? Because you're number 24. Jonathan said simply. If you want to be. What do you mean? Jonathan opened the folder and spread several documents across his desk. I've been watching you for 7 years, Maria. You're always early, you never miss a day, you treat every customer with respect. But more than that, you care about people. Yesterday wasn't the first time I've seen you give food to someone who couldn't pay. You gave hot coffee to that homeless veteran last winter. You helped that lost tourist find her hotel, even though it meant leaving your cart unattended. Maria's eyes were watering. She remembered each of those moments, but she'd never imagined anyone was watching, keeping track. I want to offer you something, Jonathan continued. There's a space available in the lobby of one of my buildings. Prime location, lots of foot traffic. I'll provide the loan for equipment, help with permits, connect you with suppliers. You could have a real restaurant, Maria, your own place. I can't afford. The loan terms are designed for success, not profit for me. Low interest, payments that adjust based on your income. Carmen paid hers off in 3 years. Maria looked at the papers spread before her. Lease agreements, loan documents, business licenses. It was everything she'd dreamed about during those long, cold mornings setting up her cart. But it felt too big, too impossible. I don't know anything about running a restaurant, she whispered. You know about food, about service, about caring for people. The rest can be learned. Jonathan sat down across from her. I'll provide business mentorship for the first year. You won't be alone in this. Why me? Really? Jonathan was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city beyond his windows. Because 35 years ago, a woman saw a hungry child and didn't think about what it would cost her to help. She just helped. And that moment, that simple act of kindness, changed the trajectory of my entire life. He turned back to her, his eyes serious. I've spent my career building things, creating wealth, making deals, but the most important thing I've ever built is this program. These opportunities for people like you, people who make the world better just by being in it. Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What would happen to my cart? You could keep it as long as you want, or pass it along to someone else who needs the opportunity. Your choice. And Diego, my son, is in high school. There's a scholarship fund attached to the program. Full tuition to any state university, plus living expenses. Jonathan smiled. Diego could study whatever he wants without you worrying about how to pay for it. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of traffic far below. Maria looked at the papers, at the photographs on the wall, at Jonathan's expectant face. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Jonathan gathered the papers and put them back in the folder, then handed it to her. But Maria, that little boy you fed in Alabama, he grew up believing that good things happen to good people. Don't make him a liar. As Maria left the building, the folder tucked under her arm like a secret. She felt as though she was walking in a dream. The streets looked the same, the sounds and smells of the city unchanged, but everything felt different. Possible. She pulled out her phone and called Rosa. I need to tell you something, she said when Rosa answered. And you're not going to believe it. Try me, Rosa laughed. After yesterday's business card drama, I'm ready for anything. What would you say if I told you that the sandwich I gave away 35 years ago just came back to change my life? Maria sat at her kitchen table that night, the folder from Jonathan spread open before her like a map to a future she'd never dared to imagine. Diego was reading over her shoulder, his eyes wide as he took in the lease agreements, loan documents, and business plans. Mom, this is insane, he whispered. He's basically offering to give you a restaurant. It's not giving, mijo, it's a loan. I'd have to pay it back. But look at these terms. Diego pointed to the payment schedule. The monthly payments are less than what we pay in rent. And look, if the business doesn't make enough in any given month, the payment adjusts downward. Maria had read that clause a dozen times, hardly believing it. She'd never heard of a loan that protected the borrower like that. There has to be a catch, she said for the 100th time that evening. What if there isn't? Diego sat down across from her. What if some people really are just good? The question hung in the air between them. Maria thought about Jonathan's face when he'd told her about the 8-year-old boy, the emotion in his voice when he'd described how a simple sandwich had changed his perspective on the world. Are you afraid? Diego asked quietly. Terrified, Maria admitted. Of failing? Of succeeding. The words surprised her as she said them. What if I'm not ready for this? What if I mess it up? What if I disappoint him? Diego reached across the table and took her hand. Mom, you've been running a food business for 7 years. You know every regular customer's order by heart. You've never missed a day of work, never served bad food, never treated anyone poorly. If that's not ready, I don't know what is. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the photographs in Jonathan's office, All those faces of people she knew from the neighborhood, people who had taken chances and built something bigger than they'd dreamed possible. She thought about Carmen, whose tamales had been legendary among the vendors, but who had always talked about wanting her own place where families could sit down together. Now Carmen had that place, and 8 employees who depended on her. She thought about Roberto, whose mechanical skills had been wasted fixing cars in an alley because he couldn't afford proper equipment or a real shop. Now he employed a dozen mechanics and was training young people from the neighborhood. But mostly, she thought about that 8-year-old boy in Alabama and how a moment of kindness she couldn't even remember had rippled forward through decades to create this impossible opportunity. The next morning, Maria made her decision. She called Jonathan's office and was put through immediately. "I want to see the space," she said without preamble. "When?" he asked, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Now." An hour later, they stood in the lobby of a gleaming office building in the Loop, looking at what had once been a coffee shop. The space was empty now, but Maria could see its potential. Large windows facing the street, enough room for maybe 20 tables, a perfect location for the lunch crowd from the surrounding offices. "The previous tenant's lease expired last month," Jonathan explained. "I've been holding it specifically for the right person." Maria walked through the space slowly, her practiced eye taking in the layout, the sight lines, the flow of foot traffic outside. She could picture it: tables with red checkered cloths, the smell of fresh sandwiches and hot soup, people lingering over coffee and conversation. "What would I call it?" she asked suddenly. "Whatever you want. It's your restaurant." Maria stood in the center of the empty space and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was looking directly at Jonathan. "Maria's Kitchen," she said. "Simple, honest, good food made with love." "Perfect," Jonathan said softly. "I have conditions," Maria said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Name them. I want to hire from the neighborhood, people who need opportunities like I did." "Absolutely. And I want to keep a pay-it-forward program. Anyone who can't afford to eat shouldn't go hungry." Jonathan's smile grew wider. "I wouldn't expect anything less. And one more thing." Maria took a deep breath. "I want to know about other vendors, people like me who might be ready for the next step. I want to help you find them. You want to join the program? Not just benefit from it, but help run it?" "That 8-year-old boy you told me about, he wasn't just helped by kindness, he was changed by it. He learned that people could care about strangers, that good things were possible." Maria looked around the empty space that would soon become her dream. "I want to teach that same lesson to other people." Jonathan extended his hand. "Partners?" Maria shook it firmly. "Partners." 3 months later, Maria's Kitchen opened to a line that stretched around the block. Rosa was there with her churro cart, giving out free samples to people waiting in line. Miguel brought flowers to decorate the tables. Even Marcus showed up with his mother, eager to try the turkey sandwich from the woman who had fed him when he was hungry. Diego worked the register after school, proud to tell customers that his mother had built this place from nothing. The walls were covered with photos, not just of the restaurant's opening, but of other vendors who had joined Jonathan's program, other dreams that had become reality. But the photo that meant the most to Maria hung behind the cash register, that old, creased picture of a little boy eating a sandwich on concrete steps. Below it, a small plaque read, "Kindness is never wasted. It just takes time to grow." As the lunch rush died down on that first day, Jonathan appeared at the counter. "How does it feel?" he asked. Maria looked around her restaurant, at the satisfied customers, at Diego laughing with a customer, at the life she'd built from a moment of kindness she couldn't even remember. "Like coming home," she said. "You know what the best part is?" Jonathan asked. "What?" "Somewhere out there, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, someone else is going to show kindness to a stranger. And 35 years from now, that kindness is going to come back to change their life too." Maria smiled, thinking about the sandwich she'd given to Marcus just 3 months ago, wondering where that boy would be in 35 years, what kind of man that moment of kindness might help him become. The circle was complete, but the story was far from over. And now that you've reached the end, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your presence matters, and your story matters too, because you never know which small act of kindness today might change someone's life forever.